Hey everyone, how's it going? I started making this video a few days ago, and it started off as a more of like a deep cuts kind of version of a video where there's several little tricks that aren't entirely obvious and they're just kind of neat little details. But as time went on, I was watching the Discord, and there was a significant number of questions that seemed to come up a lot. So I decided to go ahead and expand this video into a more broad overview of many of the features in Beacon. Now, there still are some deeper cuts in here, but there's also a lot of things that maybe a lot of users are already familiar with. So I'm sorry if it doesn't entertain you when those are going on, but I hope maybe you can at least get a couple things out of it anyhow. So, all right, here we go. So the first thing is tags. If you are adding items to loot drops or crafting costs and various other things, if you were to check out the menu when you're adding items to an item set, you'll see all these rectangles up top. By default, some of them are a certain color, some of them are gray, some are red. And what these do is this filters out results for you. And there's two ways to do it. And actually, one of them is why I'm doing this section. So first, you can, if it's red, any results that are red, anything that would involve something red, it won't show at all. Anything that's blue, it has to include that. If it's gray, it's unaffected by it. So let's say you only want cheat stuff. So if you just turn this cheat to blue, now all of a sudden all these items are just related to cheats. And cheats is kind of a catch-all term, but just basically items that you don't normally get in the game. Depreciated also has some entries like that as well. Notice I have two different entries with blue. There's no items that have both of those, so that's why I don't have any results. But the other thing I wanted to show about the tags is the fact that you don't have to click and choose an entry. You can just simply right click and it will toggle between the colors. And I just found that out yesterday and I thought it was neat and I wanted to share it. Okay, so the next lesser known beacon trick involves your save file itself for your project. So when you use Beacon, when you save a project, it automatically saves to the cloud unless you were to manually go ahead and file save as and change it to save to computer. And the nice part about leaving it as a cloud save is that it actually allows you an avenue to roll back to a previous version of your config. So let's say you were experimenting and you made a bunch of changes and you decided that, man, I just don't like those at all, as opposed to trying to like re-import old versions of the INI or manually changing them. You can actually just roll it back. So if you go to the cloud tab, and again, this only works for cloud projects, and you could tell it's a cloud project by the little cloud next to the name of the server. So if you go to the cloud tab and you choose the server that you want to roll back, and if you just right click it and hit older versions, it brings up the historical archive of all the different saves that it accumulated over time. So that's pretty handy. Now, I will warn you that if you manage to save into a new file, obviously the older saves won't be available for it. So I have a couple examples of that when, like I said, I at one point did save as local computer, and when I went to put it back in the cloud, it kind of branched it off into a new cloud file. So this one doesn't really have any older versions available to it anymore. But as you can see on the date here, it's older than the more recent one I have anyhow. So it's kind of a cool thing you can do because it gives you some protection and gives you some comfort in being able to just experiment and see what kind of stuff you can come up with without having to worry about ruining your server. So on this particular topic, I'm going to talk about the import, export, deploy processes. So a lot of users who may not be used to having a tool with so much capability, you might assume that you walk into Beacon and you're just going to copy paste stuff into your server INI and It's as easy as that, but it's actually even better than that because Beacon has the ability to deploy to settings directly in many cases. Now, some hosts don't cooperate with it. Single player works. Nitrito has built-in integration. Game Server App has built-in integration. Many servers that use FTP will work. There are exceptions. I think gPortal doesn't quite work correctly, and it's required to do the export because their settings kind of get reset when sent by FTP. But overall, the deploy process is not only makes life easier, but it also helps to prevent user error. A lot of times when people are in our Discord and they're having a problem, oftentimes it's because they're trying to copy paste stuff around and they miss a character, or they add an extra slash or an extra space, or enter in the wrong spot, or things like that. So the deploy process kind of makes that a little bit more dummy proof. And it really is dummy proof, by the way. What you want to do is if you first you got to get your server into Beacon. So the way to do that is you would do an import. And I've already done the import process on this particular project, but I'll do it again just to show you. Now this is a single player example, so it's not quite the same, but the processes are similar throughout all the different various hosts and so forth that you can use. So you just hit choose your option, hit continue. And in my case, I can just select file, and I can access the INI files from your installation folder or wherever you have them. And when you're doing it for the file import directly, it'll if you choose one, it'll ask you if you want to bring in the other one as well, which obviously just saves a little time. And I'm just going to hit next. And right now it's parsing to see what all is in the INIs. Okay, so that's finished. This example happened to be rather large, so that took a little bit. So once you're done with the first part, you'll end up at this import results window. And what this lets you do is choose what exactly you want to bring into your Beacon project. So let's say you have a server and it already has stack sizes the way you want them, but it doesn't really have the rest of the stuff how you want them. Maybe there's stuff on there, but you don't want it. So what you could do is you would enable stack sizes, and then you'll say I don't want these other things, but you'll also want to make sure you take in this file link because that's going to allow you to do the deploy. That's kind of what attaches Beacon to your server. So in this case, like I said, I'm just going to bring in the stack sizes. It may be you want to bring the whole server in, and maybe you only want to bring the file link in and start from scratch, but have the file link ready, whatever you want to do. You also have the option to replace the config or merge the two together, or obviously you could just not import if you want as well. So I'll just import these stack sizes, for example, and that brings it in right here. This particular project has a lot of stack size adjustments, but now that that's out of the way, the next part is we're going to deploy. So when you get to the deploy part, what you have the option to do is you can choose which server you want to deploy to. You can deploy to multiple servers at once. There's also another feature he added recently with this copy trigger button, which I talk about more in another video about scheduled deploys. As you're deploying, another option, especially if you're importing only part of a server and you want to override what's there, sometimes it's wise to use this erase server game INI and game user settings INI files, and that'll just kind of make sure that Beacon knows exactly what's in the server, because it often will not touch things that weren't added by Beacon. And that's just so you can configure things outside of Beacon if you choose to, although it's not a good idea. You also have the option to back up the INI. It doesn't hurt to do that at all. In fact, you should, because if you ever have any problems and you submit a ticket, actually those previous configs are also included in the ticket. You can also choose to review the changes that are made before updating the server. I'm not going to do that now, though. And I just hit begin, and it just writes it. And now I don't have to log into the host. I don't have to copy any files. I just go ahead and start playing. Now, if you're on Nitrito, another good part is it actually will uh, restart your server for you when you do that. So you don't really have to do anything. All you have to do is deploy. So it's pretty handy. It's pretty much, I would say, if it's possible to do on your host, consider it mandatory, because it's such a lifesaver, and it, like I said, it also protects against user error. I also wanted to briefly touch base on the Engram Control tab. This allows you to modify when you can unlock certain engrams or how many points it costs, and you can also define auto unlocking. And there's a lot of control over what you can do in here. And there happens to be actually an auto control feature. It's kind of like a little wizard. It gives you preset options to automatically change everything for you, so you can uh, unlock everything except for tech on spawn. You can unlock everything on spawn. You automatically unlock while you're leveling. Uh, Unlock unobtainable while leveling. So that would mean if you're on a map that doesn't have an engram, it would make you have to learn engrams that are native to the map manually. But if they're not, it would automatically learn them for you, because it's the only way to learn an engram on a non-native map. And there's other features there as well. There's also this advanced button here, which has an automatically unlock while leveling. And there's also a disable engrams by default. So that's more like a blacklisting of engrams, where you turn all the engrams off and then you turn on the ones you want. One other note of importance about engrams: if you disable an engram and you try to put an item in a drop, it won't show in that drop. Some people want to try to make it so you can only get items from drops and not craft them, but that's not, that doesn't actually work. But there is a way you can work around that if you were to make the item crafting costs be something you can't obtain in the game, or perhaps itself. Or another way to go about it is to set the unlock level for something to be 1,000 or some ludicrous number, so that you can never actually get to it. And the other comment to make about Engram Control that comes out a lot is when you're changing engrams around and you're testing it out, and you might be saying, my changes aren't taken. I can still see these engrams I disabled and this and that. Sometimes when you do engram changes, you have to use the mind wipe tonic in order to kind of reset things to where they need to be, and that comes up a lot, so that's important to know. But outside of that, that covers that Engram Control topic. But I'm quite certain there are other videos on that topic available. So the next topic is relating to this section called General Settings. So when you're in Beacon and trying to find something in one of the editors, maybe you're wondering why. Well, if I want creature adjustments, I want to make them heal faster or something like that, and you're not seeing something that you're looking for. What you can actually do is, I would check out this general settings area, and this kind of covers everything that isn't included in the other sections. So the only couple of settings that don't exist in Beacon at all would be for which map you're using and a cluster ID. Besides that, anything that isn't any of these, it'll be in here. So the way to use this thing, obviously you can just scroll down and look through everything, which can be useful just to kind of see what everything does. He does kind of describe a lot of the features and pre-populates what the game typically acts as the default values for. But you can actually, instead of flipping through the whole thing, what you could do is you could actually just search for something. So referring back to that healing rate, if we just type heal, and now we can see creature health, recovery multiplier, player health, recovery multiplier, and then there's some stuff from superstructures. And if you're more familiar with the actual INI settings as they're described, you can change it to official names as well, so you can see the actual real names. So that might help some people out. Additionally to that, there's a couple other things of importance to note here. If you're looking at a setting on here, and you'll notice that there's 3 different ways these setting labels can look. We have this one here, it's got like a bold text to it. We have this one here that's like a grayed out kind of text to it, and then we have this one here that's just like a normal font. And what that signifies is if the setting is bold, what that means is that it's going to force write the setting. So even if the setting is, for example, on this filter chat, the setting is on, but it's not bold. So what that means is that on is what the server normally would do, but Beacon's not going to tell it to do that specifically. And sometimes what happens is some of the settings don't seem to cooperate with certain installations, certain users. Sometimes a different map might handle things differently than others and things like that. So if you're looking at your list here and you see, well, the setting's already turned on. Well, what you could do is if you toggle it off and then back on again, you'll notice that it's now bold. So what that's going to do is it's going to force write the server to have this setting on instead of letting it be up to the map. Additionally, if you decide that you don't want the setting to be written anymore, or you just want to clear a setting, each of the general settings have this little red X next to it. All you do, if you click that, it just puts it back to default. And you can also actually do that with every editor here. So if you really think you messed up and you don't want to roll back to a previous save, you can actually just wipe the whole editor out in one fell swoop. Okay, the next trick involves both loot drops and item sets. So one thing that we recently learned amongst all the little tricks that TechLore puts into things that people don't notice, normally if you wanted to add drop stuff, you would hit new drop and you could choose to drop. Load item default contents when available is a great option. That's not what this is about though. And then you could go ahead and add a new item set, or you can double click on the drop and you can add other default built-in item sets, but you don't actually have to go through the menu. If you right click and hold where it says new item set, it brings up a simple little pull down, so you can just easily add the various different preset templates. And the same thing applies to the drops themselves. You can do that and bam. So you could do that without going through the menu. Of course, for the item drop, it doesn't actually load the defaults. Maybe that would be a cool option for TechLore to add in the options section of Beacon. All right, the next topic involves item stat limits. So these are kind of confusing to a lot of people. They don't understand what they're for and how they work, and we get a lot of people that ask, I want to make it so you can have stuff stronger than you can on official. Well, the bottom line is the item stat limits are not for raising stats. They're for capping them and making them smaller. So if you wanted your server to say, well, I don't want these guys to have all this OP armor, that's what this menu is for, nothing else. With that said, there is some little tricks on this screen as well that's kind of cool. So this section down here, it kind of shows you all the various items, or at least a lot of various items. The thing about it is these item stats apply to every item differently. They all have their own math on them. So what's kind of neat though is if you tick one, you get armor, and it shows you all the armor values. And the thing is that the math isn't straightforward. Notice I put 1,000 here, and this tech chest piece is 207, 10,000. It goes up to 450. It's got some kind of weird math scale. But the nice part about it is you don't actually have to sit and figure that out. All you got to do is choose the main item you want to base your adjustments on. And if you double click that value, it lets you modify this field, and you can just enter the value you want. And it automatically applies the math for you across the board. The same thing works for all these other stats, except for weight. Unfortunately, while weight does exist as an editable stat in the INI, it doesn't actually do anything, which is unfortunate because it would be cool to be able to make things weigh nothing. But unfortunately, that doesn't work, at least not that we've figured out. I'm also not quite sure what generic quality is. All right, the next trick involves the creature adjustments tab. So as you may or may not know, you can hit new adjustment and you can find a creature and you can adjust their wild damage or resistance or tamed damage or resistance. You can also prevent taming, prevent transfer, you can disable the creature, you can replace the creature. There's an asterisk with that. If the creature is not native to the map, you can't really do that directly, but there is an easy tool to make that work too, which I guess I can show you real quick as well. But let's say we wanted to do a change for all of the bosses. So if I have bosses, the boss tag here, again, you can right click it to make it blue. Now I got all the bosses showing. Let's say I want the bosses to be easier than they are. So what we'll do is we'll choose one and we'll say we're going to knock down the wild damage to 75%. And we're going to knock down the wild resistance to 75%. We're going to hit OK. And it would be kind of a bummer to have to go in and do this over and over again. And the good news is you don't have to, because there actually is a duplicate button. So all you have to do when you select one, you hit duplicate and choose all the dinos you want in here. You can use tags to help you filter them, or you can do it to all of them, or whatever you want to do. And if you click the top item and you hold shift and you hold down, you can scroll down to highlight more than one at once. I believe you can double click to add them one at a time. If you hold shift and scroll to the bottom to highlight everything, you can do it that way. There's different ways of doing that, and it's actually more of a Windows thing than a Beacon thing, but Beacon's really good about utilizing features built into the operating system. So now that I have all of them selected, I'm just going to hit the select button and bam, all the work's done. All of the bosses are now approximately 25% easier in both resistance and damage. There's a lot of built-in tools in Beacon. Yeah, a lot of people probably know about them, but a lot of people don't. We get a lot of questions about them. If you click on this tools section, there's actually a whole bunch of these little built-in automated tools that just automatically do things for you. So you can set up transferable element, and so it brings up this window here, and you can choose whether or not you want to keep shards in the mix, or if you want the element and shards, or the shards not to be involved, and just go from the item straight to element and back again. Most people would probably want to keep the shards. If you don't, you can just change it. And then you can also choose the intermediate. So some people prefer compasses. So you could, change it to compass if that's what you want to do. Soap is default. I think is the most logical choice because it's more worthless than anything else. It doesn't allow you to craft from your inventory either way. You still need the appropriate crafting stations to do this, but that's if you go through this tool, it allows you to make it so you can convert your element into a compass or soap, and then that soap will turn into shards, and then your shards can be crafted into element and vice versa. Let's say you wanted to on the island replace all the raptors with one of the other variants of raptors. So you would think you can go to this new adjustment and just say, oh, okay, well, there's a replace option here, so I'm going to just replace it. So I'll choose raptor. Oh, I got to turn off my boss tag. We'll say regular raptor, and let's say I want to replace it with let's go with corrupted raptor, and you hit OK, and you're like, okay, now I got it replaced, and it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. If a dino doesn't belong naturally on the map, it doesn't actually work. But there is a way to make it work anyways, to make it easier. So you would go ahead and do that, and then what you're going to do is you're going to hit Tools, and we're going to say convert creature replacements to spawn point additions. And it'll pop up saying it converted one creature, and what it did was it disabled the regular raptor. And then if you go into the creature spawns, you'll see it manually added the corrupted raptor to every instance where that normal raptor would be. Another easy tool to talk about is we have this setup Fibercraft server. There's a lot of Fibercraft guys around here, and they just want to come on and they just want to make it so everything is fibered. And all you gotta do is hit setup Fibercraft server, and look at that, everything's set up. There are also a lot of items that you can't do that with, and Beacon already knows about them, and it omits them, so it makes it so you're not breaking things accidentally. Another thing that Beacon can do is if you hit tools and you look, there's this option at the bottom, it says compute GFI codes. Now what that does is that helps server admins come up with the list of the absolute minimalized number of characters in order to summon every item. And the nice part about it is it also includes mod content from your blueprint section. So if you have a lot of blueprints and you like to try to simplify things as much as you can, what you could do is you can hit compute GFI codes, and it'll tell you it takes a couple minutes because it's looking at every single engram across the project, including your blueprints, which is actually stored outside of your project, but it is stored on your account. And you just hit continue. It's going to give you this dialog here. You save it wherever you want to save it. This particular one is going to go right in my downloads, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And we'll be back in a minute. All right, so now that it's done, let's check it out. So I'm going to go open that file. It puts it in a CSV format. You can open that with Notepad, but I'm going to open it with Excel. And here it is. Here's every possible easiest way to summon every item. So I'll spread these out a bit so we can see it better. So as you can see here, it's taking the shortest combination of characters possible that are unique to every item. And that's how it does it. Because GFI codes don't need to be the full word, they just need to be part of a word. But if the same part of a word is available in multiple different engrams, it doesn't work how you would expect. So it finds the unique sequence of characters in order to do it. There's also tools for converting global harvest to individual rates, which is handy because that makes your server performance improve. Setup guided editors is a way to, if you have raw INI and you didn't import, it'll take what's in your custom config section and just automatically apply it to the appropriate editors. Quick edit spawns, convert creature replacements to spawn point additions. All these tools here are just handy little things to make life easier. I'd like to touch base a little bit on the Blueprints tab up top here. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail because it really deserves its own video, but I will briefly mention several of the features in here. So if you go to this Blueprints tab, this is for Steam users who want to add mods to their server. So there's a few different ways you can go about this. The first one is you can hit this register mod button, and if you're actually an author of a mod, you can actually choose I'm a mod author who wants to add your mod to Beacon. And if you go through this exercise as the author, it'll actually integrate into Beacon, so you can anyone can use it. If you're not a mod author, but you have a mod that you want to enter in the Beacon, you could just choose this I am a server admin who wants to add mod items to Beacon and hit next. And then what you want to do is you want to give it a name. I'm going to call this one test 3. So from there, all you really need to do is you can start entering blueprints now. Now you can copy them in from a file, you can import them from a URL, or you can manually enter it. Now, if you're importing a URL or a file, if they're not really made for Beacon, it may not work. However, Beacon is pretty good about interpreting cheat codes to enter items, so that's one potential option. But let's say you just wanted to manually enter it. So if you just hit this new blueprint button, it'll open up this window, and then you'll have this common tab. And from here, you can choose what type of entry you're making. So it could be an engram, creature, a spawn point, or a loot drop. So whatever it is you're working on, and then you can enter the blueprint path and give it a name and give it tags, which I talk about in another section. There are some tags that are important for certain things. For example, if it's a craftable engram that can have a blueprint, you'll want to make sure you add a tag called blueprintable. From there you can assign which maps it works on or is relevant for. It doesn't hurt to have them all clicked. If you go to the advanced tab, each type of engram has different advanced stuff that you can add to it. This is optional for the most part. You don't have to, on the creature, you don't have to give the incubation time, the mature time. This is just for Beacon to know how the creatures or whatever it is works by default. It's not necessary to function in game though. Here's what the advanced tab looks like for an engram. So you can enter like the default crafting recipe, what level it unlocks at, required engram points, stack size, entry string, all that good stuff, and so on and so forth for that. Now, if you're gonna do a file import, I'll mention this real quick too. When you go to hit import, if the file came out of Beacon, like someone made the file in Beacon to give to you, when you get to this open window, what you'll want to do is, if it depends what format the file is in, if you navigate to where it is and you're not seeing it, if you pull down this little pull box by file name here, it could be under CSV or JSON. Oftentimes the Beacon exported ones are going to be JSON files. And this actually is going to be changing somewhat in the near future. There's going to be some new methods for doing this. Additionally, what we have is another feature that was introduced very recently called Discover Mod Discovery. So you just press this Discover Mods button, and you have to assign where your Arc installation is on your computer, and then you'll take the mod IDs that you want to try to discover, and you're going to enter them here, comma separated. And from there, if you just hit OK, it will make a little server in the background, and it will install everything. It'll install the mod, and then it tries to run as this other mod called Data Dumper, which kind of extracts information out of the mods. And if it's successful, it'll actually just automatically add the mod to your Beacon account. It doesn't work for everything. There are some mods that it doesn't work with, but it works a lot of times. And I do have a dedicated video on the subject, but I do want to mention that I forgot in that video is that the process takes some time. So if you're doing it, you're wondering, why is this taking so long? It can take 15 minutes if you're doing one mod. If you're doing 20, 30, 40, 50 mods, it could take hours. But the good news is you don't have to wait for it. You can continue to work in Beacon or the rest of your computer while it's doing it in the background. Also, if you wanted to share some mod entries that you made, you can actually also export the mod items to give to people. So you can enter the mod you want. You can highlight the items you want. You hit export, and it'll just allow you to save this exported blueprints JSON file so that someone else can load it into their Beacon. All right, so now that you got your mods entered in the blueprint section, there's one more thing you got to do before you can use it in your project. If you look up here, there's these buttons. The one next to the tools button, it says mods. And if you want to click that, the first tab in here is universal, and it includes all the the official game content. And just a little quick note: unless you're using Primitive Plus, do not enable this, because accidentally adding Primitive Plus content on a non-Primitive Plus server will break things. After that, we have the Steam only section, and these are all the officially entered, supported, built-in mods that Beacon has at this time. Many of them are from the authors personally attaching them and filling out the form and all that in order to add them. And then a lot of them are also from the main data mining project. So there are no other mods in Beacon that, like, Tecker doesn't manually add mods. It's either the author or it's going to be the data mining. And one other quick mod note about this before I move on. You'll see superstructures in here. Oh, you could search, by the way. Superstructures. And just to make clear, a lot of people are mention, well, why don't you have S plus and you have superstructures? Well, the thing is that they share the same paths. So enabling superstructures gives you like 99% of what S plus has. You can still use the superstructures mod and just use the S plus mod and use this entry to take care of it. There are a few items that are different between them, but they're very minimal. And then finally, with the mod that you entered, you want to go to the custom tab and you want to track down the mod that you entered, whether it was from discovery or something you manually made, and you have to enable that. And now that you've done that, you should be able to find your mod content within the editors. And finally, the last trick I'm going to mention, which I'm not going to go into great detail on because there's a dedicated video on the topic, but there is something called config sets. And if you have multiple servers, even if you only have one server, config sets are really powerful. Basically, it allows you to add overrides to your config that you can apply at will. So let's say I wanted to make a quick little weekend bonus, let's say. And on the weekends, we're going to make it so the crafting costs cost half as much as normal. We'll not only do that, but we'll do it with the easy tool. We're going to adjust crafting costs, and we're going to say 0.5, and now all the crafting costs are now cut in half across the board. And you'll notice it says config set weekend bonus. So what you would do is if you change it back to base, okay, so everything on your base applies to your project, your server. And then if you have anything in a config set that shares the same value as something on the base, what happens is that the config set will take precedence over that. So you can have normal stuff going on, and then you could say, well, I'm going to apply this config set for this weekend bonus. So then you would just deploy the server, and it would have the weekend bonus. And then when you're done, you just take it back off again. Let's see if I can show you how to set that up real quick. So this would be your server. You got this config sets base. That's always going to be the bottom. You can add another one on top of it. So now I have weekend bonus. So anything in weekend bonus takes precedence over the other adjustments that were made. If there's nothing on that, if it's not used and something in the editor is empty, it doesn't touch it. So all your other stuff is fine. It's only going to apply stuff if you see this little X next to it, which, by the way, you can clear out your entire editor with a single click. Well, I guess it's 2 clicks by hitting that button to make life easier there as well. So hopefully that helps someone out. I think there's a lot more little tricks to learn. I'm sure there's a ton of them I don't know about, but I'm always astounded by the fun things that I discover in Beacon and all of the little details. And it's obviously a labor of love for Tekor, and he's definitely going to continue pushing Beacon into the future, especially with ASA and R2 coming out. I would love to see where he goes with Beacon. So, all right, thanks, guys. Have a good day.